Good morning, Alan Tebuko. It looks like we're still four. It's myself, Honorable Abram, Honorable Mrolong, and Honorable Vessels. Are there other members who have connected so that we can start once we're...
Good morning, sir. Not yet. We still don't form a quorum. It's only those four at the moment.
Do we have apologies?
No apologies received.
Okay, let's wait.
Chair, good morning, it's Alan. We've received an apology from Mr. Kwankwa.
Okay, Mr. Kwankwa. So apology accepted. Honorable Dion George has joined. Honorable Shibambu has also joined. It looks like we are 6, so unless I'm mistaken.
Yes, sir, there's a quorum now for the meeting to start.
Honorable Skosana has joined. Honorable Louis has also joined. Okay, we'll have to start. The meeting is officially open. I would like to welcome members of the Standing Committee Finance, welcome officials from Parliament, welcome stakeholders who have approached the committee and who will be presenting this morning. Welcome the public at large, including the media. We have received
Chair, sorry, you've muted.
Okay. Thanks. I was saying that we have received requests from the Sekunjalo group and Mr. Maponya for them to come and raise certain issues in regard to the PIC with the committee. They have done so in particular after the meeting that we have had with the minister and the PIC. However, in the case of Mr. Maponya, even before that meeting, he had raised certain issues with the committee. I would like to indicate that the committee has got an oversight role to play on the executive, and in this regard is the National Treasury and its entities, guided by the Constitution, Section 42, 55, 56, 59, 69, 17, 92. So we have a clarity as to what are our responsibilities as it comes to oversight, which we have to play as members of this parliament. And we have to understand that we are in an era of participatory democracy, whose core value is that those that are affected by decisions have a right and responsibilities to be involved in the decision-making process. So whether a member of the public or anybody out there, if there is a decision that has to be taken, either by parliament or by legislative organ, that person or that stakeholder has a right to be consulted. So in terms of Section 56 of the Constitution, it says that the National Assembly or of its committees may receive petitions, representations, or submissions from any interested persons or institutions. So any member of the public or any institution can petition Parliament to raise an issue. And as Parliament, we are obliged in terms of Section 56 of Parliament to respond to the petition, representation, or submission raised by an institution or by members of the public. I say this because people will say, why do you meet these two entities. They've got the right to access Parliament. We can't stop them. And as this committee, we are interested in seeing to it that the hard-earned pensions of the workers are safe. And the money that has been borrowed by different business entities from PIC has to be paid back. That's our interest. We are not going to deal with the court issues because the PIC, when we invited them, have written a letter that they will not come because they have got court cases with the two entities that are coming here today. We are not going to deal with what is contained in the affidavits in regard to the two entities. We are more interested on them finding a mechanism to explain to us how are the monies that they have borrowed going to be paid back, and not deal with the merits of the court cases. We are fully aware of our responsibilities as a legislative organ of government, separate or independent from judiciary. So we are not going to be prosecutorial in asking questions or cross-examine. We'll ask clarity-seeking questions and make comments. And if you remember previously, we have met Steinhoff, we have met Mr. Marcus Joste, that we might still meet. We have met Mr. Christo Viso, and many, many others. We have got issues with PIC, and we'll still meet others. So I wanted to clarify that against the background as to why meet these business entities when there are other processes that have to do with judiciary. We respect that, but also as Parliament, we have got the responsibility not only to hold the PIC accountable, but also to hold those who have borrowed money from the PIC to account. It's not only government that accounts to Parliament, even individuals out there in the public domain, we have got the right to summon them to come to Parliament because we have that responsibility. So thanks very much, honorable members. Let's move to item 3. Is Mr. Maponya, KS Maponya, connected?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I am available.
Okay. The time is yours. You can make a presentation. How long do you think it will take for you to present?
As you have already said, honorable member, we have matters that are pending in court. Ours was an appeal which we wrote. Actually, this week is our annual anniversary of our complaint that we wrote as an agent complaint. We do not want to debate the matters individually, but sum up the imbalanced treatment and approach that the PIC has adopted towards us in all the dealings that we have had with them. There are several matters that are in court that were not, had no necessity of going to court had they had the intention and the goodwill or on their fiduciary duties to sit with us, understand what is happening in all the matters until they took us to court, and until they decided that we were going to be treated differently, we had not defaulted on any of the matters that we spoke about. We had only one matter in the poultry industry, which was a general industry issue, and there was an intervention made where they said that they need to come in to stabilize the company due to the industry, and also due to certain allegations which they made own investigations, which investigations they did not test with us, they did not discuss with us. And so this matters kept on increasing one on top of the other until a narrative was built to put us in a certain category, and until we were denied all the things and the agreements we had were reversed in such a manner that events of defaults were being caused upon us. We have managed to avoid most of those events of default, but in a situation whereby your partner and your funder makes the law, administers the law, and then tells you when it is that you can come and when it is that you can go, we felt that we needed mediation, and we needed to have what do you call it? We needed to have constructive discussions instead of having, aspersions cast and other things. And also, we also note some of the misinterpretations of the Mpati Commission, of which I am going to hand over in terms of the Mpati Commission to our attorney, Mr. Bophelo Malapela, to actually read into record our understanding and our summation, which was made by him in consultation with senior counsel. Thank you.
Thank you. You said somebody is going to present. Where is it? You said Mr. Bophelo.
Yes, Mr. Bophelo Malapela.
Has he sent us the documentations, or does he also want to share the screen, or how is he going to make a presentation?
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Do you have a document to share on the screen?
Unfortunately, I do not have this document to share on screen, but I can always send the document to yourselves at a later stage. It's not really a lengthy document, but safe to say that as Mr. Maponya is saying, nowhere in the Mpati Commission report have Mr. Maponya or any of his entities been found to have engaged in any wrongdoing in as far as the terms of reference of the Commission. Where the Commission, and I'd like to indicate the fact that when the Commission started, Mr. Maponya did submit his affidavit to the Commission and indicated his intention to appear before the Commission. It was decided by the Commission itself not to call him to the Commission. However, when he complained, I was called by Judge Mpati in chambers together with counsel because Judge Mpati wanted to understand what we were complaining about. And Judge Mpati made it clear that in as far as he was concerned, there was nothing in the terms of reference that involved or that required him calling Mr. Maponya to come and testify before the Mpati Commission. Hence, Mr. Maponya, he did not deem it necessary to call him to come and testify at this commission. Now, in the report, what the commission did was it merely used the transactions that related to Mr. Maponya and his entities as a case study to warn the PIC that if they continued on this trajectory of having multiple transactions with a single individual, it could lead to numerous problems should that single individual run into problems in as far as maybe defaulting and the like. But the commission report does not make any findings of unlawfulness or illegality as relates to the transactions that involve Mr. Maponya and his entities. That is basically what I wanted to make very clear in as far as Mr. Maponya. Now, the things is I do not have much in the way of submissions because the chairperson has already indicated that you are not going to deal with matters that are before the court. Safe to say that events seem to have overtaken Mr. Maponya's complaint to the commission, to yourselves, sorry, in that since the time that he lodged this petition to date, we are involved in numerous litigation with the PIC, and it would have been Mr. Maponya's intention or what he wished that when he lodged this complaint or petition, that the standing committee would intervene, call the parties and mediate and avoid a lot of money that is being spent on lawyers in the courts fighting matters between himself and the PIC. Mr. Chair, I'm here if there are any issues where in the committee would require clarity, and Mr. Maponya is also available to offer clarity or answer questions where we will be asked clarity-seeking questions, except dealing with matters that, as I say, all the matters are now in front of the courts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Bupilo, Mr. Maponya, for the presentation. So you are done with your presentation.
I don't know if Mr. Maponya wants to add anything.
No, we are done. We would like for matters to proceed.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Let's move to the next item. Item 4, the Sekunjalo group. Over to you. If you have got
Chairperson.
Honorable Shubam.
Yeah, I'm not sure what becomes the context of these deliberations? Because I would have thought that the first presentation will specify that this is what we have done with the PIC. This is where the disputes or concerns are. This is what we think the committee can do, because the presentation that has just been made now has never clarified of exactly what is the area of concern. And it came at a very high level, because like it almost assumed that all of us in the committee will know what is happening between Mr. Maponya and the Public Investment Corporation and all of those issues there. And there's never been any deliberation in the committee about that. And although he says that there were letters that were returned to the committee, there's never been any deliberation on the contents of what are his concerns. And if the issue is about court, if all these issues that were deliberating in court and cannot be deliberated upon today, why are we then discussing it if we can't deliberate on it? So I don't know what really we seek to achieve in terms of this, unless if we clarify what is the purpose of this engagement, so that we know how to make interventions and inputs, and whether we should call PIC and all of those other things that are necessary in this regard. Please guide, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I think you are right, Honorable Bushwab. When we come to item 7 on deliberations by the committee, those are some of the questions that we'll have to ask Sekunjalo and Mr. Maponya. Because as I've said, when members of the public, institutions or organizations send petitions to Parliament or representations or submissions, we have got an obligation to allow them access to Parliament. And we felt in this regard, because the PIC is our responsibility in terms of oversight, that let them come to the committee, present themselves, how they want the committee or Parliament to get involved in their matter between PIC and themselves. And it was against that background that we allowed for this session to take place. So we'll come to that under item 7 when we engage the two presenters, where they will have to come clearly as to where does Parliament come in this regard. Thanks. Let's move to the next team.
Chairperson?
Yes.
Look, I agree with you. I think that you've summarized the concerns raised by Honorable Shivambo quite succinctly. Actually, I agree with you. And that is why I'm going to request from you that the next presenters must then, in line with how you've summarized this matter, so that this must not be an exercise in futility, be able to expound on these issues so that we don't go back to deliberations and ask them and raise the same concerns that we raised with Mr. Maponya and his attend. So our expectation is that the next presenters must be able to say what are their issues, dissect them, and say to us what is their expectation of the committee. So they don't do the same thing that the previous presenters did, and then we come back during deliberations and we raise the same concerns. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Before we take Sekunjalo, do we have a documentation from Mr. Maponya that can be shared with the members? Alan and Tebu, can you hear me?
Yes, Chair, I can. We haven't received anything from Mr. Maponya besides the document he sent, I think, in March last year, which was shared with committee members at the time. I mean, it's more than a year back. I can share it now with members. Just email it through to them.
Okay.
If I may come in, there are two documents that we submitted. There is a document that we submitted in March last year, which sums up all the history and the matters that we have with the PIC. And there is also the document that we submitted after the PIC refused to honor a court ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal and instead took a civil matter to the Constitutional Court.
Okay. You have all those documents, Alan and Tebu, so that you can quickly send them to members right now. As you said, the March last year document, you have already sent it to members, but you can resend it.
Yes, Chair, the March document I'll quickly share with members. If I can just ask Mr. Maponya or his attorney just to share that document that he's referring to now, if he can quickly send it to me, please.
Okay. Mr. Maponya and Mr. Upilo, can you quickly send us the latest document that you are speaking about?
Will do.
Okay. Thanks. Let's move to the next item. Thanks, Mr. Mrolo, also for your intervention. I think the Sekunjalo group have heard what Honorable Shibambo and Honorable Mrolo have raised as to exactly where does the committee come in this regard of the issue between themselves and the PIC. Yeah. Over to you, Sekunjalo.
Good morning, Honourable Member. This is Dr. Iqbal Survey, the Chairman of this Sekunjalo Group, and Honourable Members of firstly, we would like to thank you for this opportunity to present to SCOF. We appreciate the importance of SCOF and we appreciate the importance of Parliament in our democracy. Secondly, I want to point out that there will be two presentations. We have sent both sets of presentations to the Secretary of SCOF. The first presentation will be by IO Technologies, and the presentation will be by the Chairman of IO Technologies, Advocate Wallace and Gorky, and the CEO of IO Technologies, Howard Blakes. The second presentation will be by independent media, and that presentation will be done by the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Takutswa Hove, as well as the additional members of independent media. I think one of the points I just want to point out, Honourable Member Chair, is that we have provided you with comprehensive presentations in both cases. Whilst that is for information purposes, the presenters might not go through the full presentation due to time constraints. We also just want to point out one other issue, which is an issue of governance. The Sekunjalo Group has, more than 200 investments, and these are two of the 200 investments. As a group, we are an indirect shareholder of IO Technologies Limited. We are not a direct shareholder primarily. We are invested in one of the listed companies called Africa Equity Investments, in which the Sekunjalo Group has a shareholding, and that company owns 49% of IO. The PIC owns 30% of IO, and about 200 other shareholders are shareholders in the public company. So we have no locus standi in terms of asking IO to come and present, but we have made a formal request to the IO board and the IO chairperson and CEO, and they have agreed to come and present to Parliament. So I just want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of the separation between Sekunjalo Investment Holdings and IO Technologies. They're completely separate entities. IO has its own board of directors, its own governance, and we have a minority representation on the board of IO. So that's the first point I want to make from a governance point of view. IO kindly invited me to also sit in on their presentation, although I'm not a board member of IO, and I'm really happy for that. Secondly, when Honourable Minister Tito Mboweni invited the Sekunjalo group to come to SCOF to present, he had also made the point that, again, based on the previous presentation by the PIC had kept on referring to Sekunjalo when they referred to really independent media or the consortium, the special purpose vehicle that invested into independent media. I want to put on record that the PIC has never invested in Sekunjalo Investment Holdings ever. We have written to the PIC on numerous times asking them to correct that misrepresentation. The PIC has invested directly in independent media, and it has invested in a special purpose consortium of more than 30 groupings of labor federations, women's groupings, NGOs, etc., which is called the Sekunjalo Independent Media Consortium, which has been renamed Independent Media Consortium. But I think just for the record, the PIC has no investment, no loans, absolutely zero to any Sekunjalo investment holding company. It is specifically invested alongside Sekunjalo in independent media and in IO technologies, in which Sekunjalo has invested in indirectly. So I thought it's very important to clarify, those particular points. I do hope that you give the chairman and CEO of IO Technologies and the operating officer of independent media and the editors the opportunity to present their presentation, because I think they put a lot of time in, as the honourable members of the committee may see, and they do address directly at the end of the presentation what they would request respectfully from SCOF. So once again, I want to thank Minister Tito Mboweni, and I want to thank Honourable Chairperson and the members of SCOF for giving us the opportunity as a group. I mean, paramount to us is that we're a group with thousands and thousands of employees and tens of thousands of families depending upon their livelihood. And I think it's so important. And also, we value the contribution of PIC and GPF to our investments, our co-investments with us. And we want to find a way to ensure that we have value for the GPF and the PIC. May I now, Honourable Chairperson, invite the Chairperson of IO Technology Solutions, Advocate Wallace Mgoki, and the CEO of IO Technology Solutions to present to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Surve, for those introductory remarks. Honourable Chairperson and honourable members of this Standing Committee on Finance, as Dr. Surve has already said, we did send our presentation on time. Just by way of background, as Dr. Surve said, the Honourable Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, invited IO and the PIC to present to Parliament to hear the IO side of the story in relation to the dispute between IO and the PIC. IO welcomed the opportunity and sent a formal letter to the Standing Committee Chairperson and Secretariat indicating our willingness to come and present. And we thank the Standing Committee on Finance for giving us the time to present. Honourable Chairperson and honourable members of SCOF, this is the outline of the presentation, and we will share the presentation with myself as Chairperson and the CEO, Mr. Howard Platjes. Beginning with the outline of the presentation, we'll talk about the IO company, IO's opportunity to transform the ICT sector on scale. The detractors smear campaign against IO launched in March 2018. The PIC Commission of Inquiry and Voluntary Submission and Engagement, consequences of the negative media campaigns, CPIC and PIC litigation against IO, and in relation to that, material consequences and value destruction, reputational consequences and value destruction, institutional consequences and value destruction, current litigation against IO being sub judice or lis pendens, and then a summary. And then the 6th point will be looking at IO value protection and return strategy and then we'll come to the conclusion. On IO, the company, Chairperson and honorable members, IO had more than 21 subsidiaries and investments in the ICT sector, was established for more than 25 years and has built up capacity as a fully transformed ICT company. It has 2,000 plus employees and has contributed 1.1 billion in taxes. It's at the cutting edge of ICT innovation with technologies in health, information systems, application software, unified communications, cybersecurity, etc. IO has supported Black entrepreneurs in the ICT sector, committed more than 350 million to the development of the sector, Social Development Fund. IO Academy is the largest JSE listed ICT company with the largest net asset value, and it's Black owned. At this point, I want to invite the CEO, Mr. Howard Platjes, to give you a brief overview of IO major subsidiaries. Over to you, Mr. Platjes.
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, I just want to give you an overview of some of our subsidiaries. As we said, we had 21 subsidiaries, but we've just listed 5 here for your attention. The first one is HST System, Health System Technologies. HST is a specialist technology provider to the healthcare industry since 1980. Its client base consists of large and private health sector organizations in South Africa and in Nigeria. It's powered the technology behind the NHLS for over 20 years. And in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, implemented 28 integrations free of charge to enable the national laboratory to communicate with private entities and consolidate reports and statistics. Next slide, please. Then we have Sizwe Africa IT Group, which is a leading and preferred ICT solutions provider for large public and private organizational clients across the industry, across various sectors. It services managed services, fiber and facilities management, solar solutions, and has many finance options for ailing municipalities. Sizwe IT Group employs over 600 people. It has a vast geographic footprint across South Africa. And although it has 34 offices, it's almost in every town and city in the country to provide services to municipalities. Sizwe IT Group holds strategic partnerships with world-leading OEMs, including Samsung, Dell, HP, Apple, Microsoft, etc. Then we have Pulling Technologies, almost 2 decades old. Pulling is one of the most reputable cybersecurity companies in South Africa, services large blue-chip multinational organizations, most financial institutions in South Africa, and public sector clients. Its services includes data, user and access security, as well as governance, risk, and compliance programs. Pulling's partners include IBM, Netscope, Radware, Risic, Beyond Trust, and many others, and it has been at the center of the remote working environment in South Africa. Headset Solutions was established in 1993 and is currently one of the largest importers and distributors of telecommunications hardware and consumer electronics in South Africa. It's at the center of unified communications in South Africa. And just to make the committee aware that today there will be an announcement again of another company that we've acquired called Kathia Communications, which will create a very large unified base here in South Africa. We distribute the Poly range of audio and video consumer products, as well as Jabra and Confitel products for the entire African continent. We have the largest inventory in Africa, particularly in the midst of this pandemic. We've serviced learners, students, the hearing impaired, in factory workers with hearing equipment. Over 100 million headsets have been sold in South Africa over the last year. The fourth business that we want to talk about is GC2T, Global Command and Control Technologies, which is the leading technology provider for enabled awareness solutions across the commercial, security, and military domains. Solutions include asset and force tracking across the globe, land, air, or maritime, spatial awareness, and constructive simulation technologies. GC2T currently services the supply and command control communication and information systems for the African Union's multinational joint task force, and it is currently in discussions with the Indian Army for other technologies to be rolled out. Just to give you a sense of our footprint, we service all of these. We have a very diverse client base in all of South Africa's major cities, and we service a number of African countries, as you can see on this map. I'd like to hand over to my chairman again.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Committee members. I want to speak briefly now on the IO history and growth strategy. As already alluded to, IO has existed for more than 20 years, built up a formidable ICT capacity in a largely untransformed industry. Its board composition, executive team, and employees are fully transformed. It embarked on a growth strategy to fully transform the ICT sector by 2020, identified a number of acquisition targets to own and transform private and public sector customers. And to execute this strategy, IO put together a prospectus and a market sounding document for investors, including the PIC. The PIC committees that evaluated the IO team's proposals were uniform in their support and valuation of IO. As a matter of fact, the pre-listing statement was a guideline for all investors into IO. And we just show in the next slide that IO was listing, in 20 December to cheers from all stakeholders, practically. And in the next slide, Chairperson will talk about IO's commitment to transformation. The commitment to transformation started with inviting COSATU's investment arm, Kopana, Pop Cruz investment arm, more than 3,000 Black women through Black women's groupings and other small Black business and community groupings. Use this capital base to support Black businesses. Unani Capital expand its business, the FinTech Fund, IO Enterprise Fund, Black Business Council representatives. IO Academy committed towards the development of Black professionals with a focus on women and focus on rural communities. IO had more community-based shareholders than any other company on the JSE before listing. And now to talk briefly about IO post-listing smear campaign. The Tractor smear campaign against IO was launched in March 2018. Next slide. IO was caught in the battle at the PIC between different factions as collateral damage. Up until March 2018, there was no problem with IO listing. Asset managers and hedge funds took advantage of the negative publicity against IO to undermine its value for their own nefarious objectives. Extensive collaboration between journalists, public commentators, and private corporate entities designed to do maximum damage. Unusually, in the history of this country, the CPIC has never intervened to overturn a PIC investment. Suddenly, CIPC, as a result of media and political pressure, started a litigation. CPIC case was dismissed by the courts and showed the frivolous nature of its complaint. The impact of this and the PIC Commission of Inquiry had devastating consequences for IO, needless to say. The PIC Commission of Inquiry, next slide. The PIC Commission of Inquiry and Voluntary Submission and Engagement. IO welcomed the Commission and voluntarily sent executives to be fully transparent in engagement with the PIC commissions. Was shocked at the intense focus on IO compared to other companies. No intention to talk about the outcome of the PIC commission except to say that there was no evidence of corruption in the report. The investment was presented to the PIC by the IO corporate investment team, including the newly recruited COE from a multinational, executives with a combined value of 25 years in ICT sector presented to peers, experienced PIC analysts with 50 years experience, and together saw the business case for the ICT investment and transformation. Hearsay and unsubstantiated claims were made by people at the commission. IO chose to deal with the facts instead of gossip. IO is confident, notwithstanding the negative publicity, that it will be successful in any litigation by the PIC or any other party for that matter. IO's position remains that it has done nothing wrong and is a victim of a smear campaign by some hidden ends. I'm going to talk next slide, Chairperson, on the material consequences and value destruction. The PIC initially insisted that the British Telecom BT investment formed part of the IO listing. Significant capital was earmarked for the BT investment, which was the foundation for multinational customer acquisition strategy, for example, Sasol. PIC scuppers the British Telecom investment by relying on negative media. Without PIC support, the BT company decided to withdraw from engagement with IO. We fear that there is a hidden hand that used the commission to smear IO and that continues to direct activities to undermine the business and reputation of IO. IO lost normal business, which it had prior to listing, to the tune of 1.3 billion in public and private sector. IO faced cancellation of banking facilities. IO has been irrationally censored by the JSE for what may be regarded as regular compliance issues and not corruption. I make the point. And on the reputational consequences, Chairperson, IO has suffered irreparable harm and reputational damage by actions of the PIC and the media landscape. Acquisition targets are adopting a wait-and-see approach. Customers in the private sector are skeptical and are reducing orders. Employees, executives, and board of directors are negatively impacted. Management is spending inordinate operational time defending the company on numerous levels. So are board members. Banks are terminating facilities and closing accounts based purely on media reputation. It should be noted by SCOP that there are companies in the ICT sector who have admitted to fraud in the public sector that are also listed, and yet there's been no attempt to stop their banking facilities, whereas IO executives have been running helter-skelter for no reason. The lucrative Sasol contract leading to loss of South African jobs was handed over to an Indian company. The loss of a healthcare software contract, losing jobs to an US-based entity. IO is a target of a coordinated smear campaign with ominous intentions. Next slide. On the institutional consequences and value destruction. In summary, IO is a victim of the following institutional actions. The JSC and FSCA targeted IO unfairly and censored it with fines, which made no sense. CIPC launched litigation case, which it lost against IO, without any rational basis and precedent. PIC has acted to destroy IO, whereas its engagement with other companies not transformed is one of a business. With IO, it is agenda-driven and targeted. This is differential treatment of IO, as we heard in the earlier presentation. It is unfair and it is prejudicial. Next slide. On the current litigation against IO, the PIC has instituted litigation against IO. The matter is sub judice or lis pendens. The court records, of course, are available to the public. IO is hopeful that the PIC will work with it to resolve outstanding matters. Ultimately, IO and the PIC have to work together to protect the value of the investment for the benefit of the involved, preeminently the government employees' pension fund beneficiaries. Litigation is costly, is protracted, and adversarial, and the outcome is always win or lose. IO is not a political opponent of the PIC and should not be treated as such. It is a business. It is time for it to be allowed to do its business. Which business in the world can operate without banking facilities? Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. On the summation of consequences, we have demonstrated to SCOF the devastating material, business, institutional, reputational, and legal consequences of the barrage of smear campaign that IO had to endure to date. We have also demonstrated that IO has done nothing wrong, at least nothing proven to this effect. Only SCOF can normalize this relationship between the PAC as a shareholder of IO for the medium to long-term interests of stabilizing the business. The winds of the economy are unstable enough. There is no need to add further instability. We are pleading for SCOF then to allow IO to fulfill its potential as a fully transformed ICT business and grow value for the government employees pension fund and its beneficiaries. We are pleading for SCOF to take concrete steps to create an environment conducive to these warring parties to call a truce and get down to doing what they are mandated to do by their constituents. Next slide. On the IO Value Protection Retention Strategy, Chairperson and honorable members, IO has a duty to its shareholders, its employees, its customers, and transformation in the ICT sector. IO is doing everything possible to ensure that the government employees pension fund, who represent pensioners' money, is able to realize value from its investment in IO. If IO was able to operate as a normal company in South Africa, it would not just retain value for the GEPF, it would be able to grow substantially as stated in its pre-listing statement to the PIC. IO's board of directors and management have instead had to deal with all the issues previously stated. Steps.
Next slide.
Next slide. The steps IO has taken in a difficult environment. Despite enormous external pressure, IO remained focused on the business, as we've heard from the CEO just now about the signing of another transaction. IO has grown the net asset value of IO close to 5 billion and continues to grow year on year. Retained its strong cash position, paid the PIC 180 million in dividends, contributed 1.1 billion to the tax fiscus, continues to look at acquisition targets in order to transform the ICT sector and add value to the investment of the PIC in IO. Even in this, the PIC continues to put barriers and impossible hurdles, and to be specific, by not allowing IO to provide financial assistance to its subsidiaries. On more than one occasion, this has occurred, as a matter of fact. On next slide, strengthening of IO governance. At the behest of the PIC, IO appointed 4 additional directors and an independent chairman, reducing the influence of AEI presence on the board. Professionals appointed to the board committees, strengthening of finance and internal audit function, and appointment of new external auditors. 2 years of unprecedented audits which yield no different results. Active board engagement with management on a regular basis, especially during the difficult COVID-19 period. Governance focused on retention of value, especially of the government employees pension fund. Appointment of 25-year expert in treasury functions and asset management responsible for IO Treasury. And IO's plea, I'm moving towards the conclusion, Mr. Chairperson. Firstly, appreciation for the opportunity to present our point of view. IO pleads with SCOF to examine the facts as opposed to the noise and the hearsay and act impartially and fairly. We have shown that since middle 2018, IO has faced a barrage of litigation, investigations, and unwarranted inquiries. The consequences eroded value for the shareholders and the job insecurity in the company's human capital. It is no small matter for people to lose jobs. They lose a source of substance and subsistence. It is a fatal matter. It is said that the PS's conduct and other collaborators has caused significant erosion to their investment in IO on behalf of the GPE, PF, and its beneficiaries. IO is for an investigation.
Next slide, please.
Next slide. IO is a business committed to ICT transformation as a business and moral imperative. It is defenseless against the kind of political and media smear campaign that it has been subjected to for so long. It is defenseless against the resources of the PIC, which is using pensioners' money to drive a political agenda against IO, undermining the business through both an overt public and covert actions. South Africa needs greater accountability by officials, especially in state-owned enterprises and regulatory institutions, to ensure that there is no bias, no unfairness, and no victimization, and that state organs should not be used or misused, for that matter, to settle political scores or destroy businesses or individuals. I therefore request the following. That the Standing Committee on Finance investigation into the conduct of institutions that are undermining the democracy and business confidence in our country, that actively engage in destroying IO and the GBF value. These include the JSE, banking institutions, CIPC, and FSCA. The role of the PIC and National Treasury officials that are playing a hidden hand in the cancellation of contracts, banking facilities, and support by customers and service providers to IO. Their callousness has gone too far to submit. This conduct has huge reputational impact for the South African business reputation and business confidence, especially as IO has done nothing wrong and been transparent about business dealings from inception to date. In conclusion,
Next slide.
By way of conclusion, we have given you an overview of IO, the business, its companies, its people, its customers, and its commitment to transformation. We have shown you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Committee members, the consequences of the negative material, institutional, legal, and reputational campaign against IO. We have demonstrated to you the importance of good governance as well as prudent executive management to retain and grow value for the GEPF. We have pleaded with you to investigate the conduct of the parties previously mentioned in undermining the investment in IO with highly irregular and possibly criminal conduct on their part. At all times, IO has been transparent, has worked hard to build its business and retain its commitment to retain its business in the ICT sector. If IO is allowed to do its business without shackles, like every other normal ICT company, it will realize the value for its shareholders, including the GEPF, as outlined in its prospectus. We thank you for this opportunity and welcome any further questions to the IO chairperson and the CEO. Thank you.
Are you done from the side of IO Technologies so that we can move to independent media? We'll take all presentations and then come later with the clarity-seeking questions and comments. So, IO is done.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Iqbal Sev and Dr. Mgoge. Where's the independent media group?
Honorable Chair, they will now start their presentation. I just have to move to a different office, but they can start so long. I will join them in the other office. Independent media will start their presentation, and the presentation will be done by Takutswa Ho, the operating officer, Mr. Sifisa Mashlangu, Mr. Sian Ruzi, and Mr. Yandan Glutli, and Mr. Anis Sali. They will be presenting in 2 minutes, Honourable Member and Chair. Thank you. I just have to move across to the separation of offices between the group entities. Sure. Please excuse me for a minute. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I can see the screen for the independent media group is already here. Over to you, independent media group. Takuza Ove, where are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Thank you, honourable members of the committee. I'm just wanting to check if you guys can see us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can you show the screen that we can be seen like in the other room?
We can see you. We can see the screen. We can hear you.
That's fine. Thank you. Right. All right. So, background to the presentation. We're here as a result of the invitation that was extended to us by the Honourable Minister, Tito Mboweni. And on behalf of the independent media family, all 1,500 employees within our stable, we'll welcome this opportunity to present in front of the committee. I'm going to skip the point of clarification because Dr. Survey in the earlier part of the presentation had dealt with that. That point of clarification is with regards to the separation of identity between the Sekunjalo Independent Media and the Sekunjalo Investment Holdings stable. For the parties that do not know independent media, we just shared the slide just to give you a sense of some of the publications and the titles that are within our stable. Right. Next slide. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just having some IT screens because I'm not seeing the screen on my side. To see that screen.
You can't share the screen?
No, I'm not seeing the on my side. So I'm presenting blindly. I'm not seeing the apologies for that.
We are on the outline of the independent media presentation.
Yes, on my side where I'm presenting, I'm not seeing the screen.
Oh, Alan and Tebu. Alan.
Yeah. I think Alan's screen needs to be because your
is disabled. Can't they share it on their side?
Ask him to share it. Ask Alan to share the presentation.
I am sharing the presentation.
Okay, Alan, we're not seeing. We're not seeing the presentation on our side.
Actually, we're not seeing it on this screen, like we did in other area.
Not too sure what the issue is, but I'm sharing it from my side. I can see the screen on my side.
All right, it could be an IT issue on my side. My IT guys are just having a look at it quickly. Apologies.
That's better.
Well, this one is
okay. That's fine. Just on this one. Yeah. Okay.
That's much. Just put it in a single screen.
Okay, all right. So apologies for that, Mr. Chair and committee members. All right, just the outline of our presentation. Section 1, we're going to deal with the media landscape prior to the Sekunjalo acquisition of independent media. And within that section, specifically, we're going to look at the media landscape pre-94, the PIC's investment in independent media, including its rationale, the transformation of the media industry, PIC's investments, the actual facts as opposed to the misinformation that's in the public domain, and the various attempts to derail the transaction before the acquisition even took place. The next section will deal the early years post acquisition, all the resistance into independent media's into the space, the transformation drive within the company. Section 3 will look at all the actions that we've taken to try to unlock value for the PRC. And Section 4 will deal with conclusion and our future outlook. Right, next slide. Okay, right. So the media landscape pre-94 consisted of two major blocks: the Afrikaans media block and the English media block. And there were four major media groupings in South Africa, which from a print point of view, there still are four major print stables in the country. The Independent Media Group, Naspers, Caxton, and Arena, which is known out there as the Times Media Group. The Afrikaans media block consists of Media 24 and Caxton, and the roots of a lot of these two major companies were directly linked to the apartheid regime and businesses at the time. The Naspers arose out of the National Party and predominantly dominates the Western Cape. P.W. Botha was one of their editors and sat in quite a lot of the cabinet meetings during the apartheid era. Hendrik Verwoerd, who was the architect of apartheid, was also an editor of the Transvaal, which is also was part of the Naspers stable. Naspers' major publications include the De Burger, De Beeld report, and the City Press, which was launched for the English-speaking and black markets. They also have the largest online site in South Africa, with the News 24 platform. A former chairman of Naspers famously wrote to P.W. Botha, pledging support for the National Party in exchange for commercial contracts. On the Caxton side, that also rose out of the Afrikaner media grouping based in present-day Gauteng. And their English publication is The Citizen, which still exists today. There's quite a lot of significant shareholding from the Rupert family within Caxton and other media, television media outlets like ETV, ENCA, and they also provide support for other publications like the Daily Maverick, in addition to some of the other unknown funders of the Daily Maverick. Next slide. Right, prior to 94, the English media was controlled by the Oppenheimer family via Anglo-American and its various subsidiaries. This resulted in two major media groupings: the Times Media Group, present-day Arena, owned the Sunday Times and the Business Day, and the Argus Group, which is now the present-day Independent Media. The Oppenheimer family decided to sell their shares in the Times Media Group, and this was sold to a consortium led by our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, through the National Economic Consortium, which ultimately became the Johnny Consortium. This changed over time to become the present-day Johnny Holdings and Avusa, which had a shareholding from Tokyo Sefale and the Velapanda Media Group. As it was listed, the parties at the time were unable to gain meaningful control and drive the transformation agenda of the companies, as their stakes were minority stakes, and there was quite a lot of separation with the newsrooms. During the build-up to 1994, the Anglo-American owners did not want the Argus Group to fall into the hands of the ANC or any parties that are sympathetic to the ANC. This led to Tony O'Reilly acquiring independent media. So Tony O'Reilly was the owner of Independent Media Ireland. Hence the name changed from the Argus Group to Independent News and Media. So from 93 to 2003, the independent media was owned by the Irish, and control changed from Tony O'Reilly to Dennis O'Brien. Post the 2007 global market crash, independent media then found themselves in serious financial difficulties, having been leveraged as a result of acquisitions around the globe, and were thus forced to downsize, and they started selling a lot of their businesses in South Africa and Australia. So in 2012, the announced that they will be selling the South African asset, and they appointed various corporate advisors to effect the sale. There was a bid process that was opened, and initially 30 bidders took part, but this was eventually shortlisted to about 5 bidders. Dennis O'Brien, the major shareholder at the time for Irish Independent, indicated publicly that he would not accept anything less than 280 million euros for the South African asset. And at the time, this translated to 3.2 billion rand. However, as the bid process and the sale process went ahead, the Irish were forced to reduce their asking amount, and this was due to various factors, which included the agent need to have access to cash because of the bank debt that they had, the impact of the rand-dollar exchange, and most importantly, the Marikana massacre, which created a crisis of confidence in the South African economy. 5 shortlisted bidders included prominent South African businessmen from prominent families, and also persons holding various political positions. The Gupta family at the time also tried to make the shortlist, but ultimately failed to put together a deal. So they fell short of that whole process. The Sekunjalo consortium was successful with an initial indicative bid of 2.6 billion, which was further negotiated downwards to 2 billion rand. So the SIM consortium, which has now been renamed to the Independent Media Consortium, was set up by Sekunjalo investment shareholder acting as an anchor shareholder. The primary reason for acting as an anchor shareholder was to provide the necessary capital support, that was technical and corporate transaction experience, that was needed to be able to put the deal across the line. There was a broad-based consortium that was part of the SIM consortium, and this consortium in its formulation was discussed with the PIC, and included various labor union organized investment holding companies, women's groupings, community groupings, and various representatives from the Black Business Chamber and the Black Business Council, and various NGOs, including the Eastern Cape Community Trust. Importantly, within that consortium, independent media employees via the share trust were also allocated shareholding within the consortium. Initially, the PSC had made a non-binding commitment to fund the 2 billion rand that was needed to acquire independent media at a time when the Irish were demanding close to 3.2 billion. Independent Sekunjalo, as anchor shareholder, appointed the London division of the global Global City Bank as corporate transaction advisor to the transaction. And this unit had strong media M&A experience, having been involved in various media transactions similar to the acquisition of independent media across the globe. Citibank was retained by Sekunjalo at its own risk as an advisor. So if the deal had failed, Sekunjalo would have been responsible for all the fees and not the consortium. The consortium also engaged various former senior Black editors to advise on the purchase of the independent media acquisition. Next slide, please. So this graph just shows high level the makeup of the various consortium members, which included labor federations, SACTU, FAWU, and Kopano, which is the investment arm of COSATU, BE groupings, community groupings, rural and women's groupings, and also the independent media employees. Next slide. Right, the PIC's rationale for the investment in independent media. So firstly, it's important to understand that PIC was already an investor in the media space, having been investors in NASPERS, having been investors in Times Media and Caxton. So they had a very good understanding of the media landscape. So this is not a transaction that they did without an understanding of the sector. They actually had quite a lot of experience within the sector. This print-focused listed investments over the time have lost massive value over time as a result of the structural shifts that are affecting the print media landscape as a result of the rapid shift of audiences to digital and social media platforms. PIC supported the transaction, firstly, because on a purely commercial basis and on an EBITDA-driven valuation, the 7.5 times multiple that was applied on the valuation was in line with local and international standards. And this was also supported by DD valuations, discounted cash flow valuations. Secondly, PIC saw this as an opportunity to create new NASPERS as the then CEO, when presenting to Parliament, referred to independent media as a potential Black NASPERS. Obviously, just being 1% of NASPERS is a major achievement. And that was the idea to create that type of value. Then thirdly, it was an important opportunity to bring back an important national asset back into South African hands. And then lastly, it was an opportunity to enable media diversity in terms of ownership, transform the media landscape, and transform the narrative of media in South Africa by having one of the largest Black media groupings in the hands of Black people. Next slide. So the vision for the consortium with regards to independent media was to lead the transformation agenda in the media landscape, give a voice to previously marginalized society through ownership and representation, drive the new media agenda centered around the need to transform the society and the need to transform the economy. There was a need to present duality in storytelling. There's always two sides to every story, so it's never one side. So it's important to hear the other side of the story. It was also important to tell the stories of Black South Africans with a nuance. So you need Black South African people to speak of Black South African experience. There was a need for media to power the growth and development, grow the vernacular media to ensure access for all South Africans in their own languages, And the group had been successful with its rollout of Isolezwe in KwaZulu-Natal, and thereafter with the COSA edition of Isolezwe as well. There was a need to transform the decision-making structures within independent media to ensure that it was representative of all South Africans, and to do media for social good and have a meaningful impact on society and societal matters. And most importantly, there was a need to keep our people employed. More recently, with the COVID pandemic, we're proud to say that we did not embark on any large-scale retrenchments at independent media. And with all the trauma that the country went through, none of our employees found themselves out of a job. We, at very painful cost, we managed to keep all of our employees employed. Next slide. So there's a couple of myths out there regarding the PIC's involvement in the independent media transactions. So one of the major urban myths is that PIC invested the full 2 billion rand to acquire independent media. This myth was deliberately propagated by detractors of independent media and its holding company. And that was to create the impression that PIC funded the transaction for various ulterior motives. The reality is that PIC, on its own account and not on the account of Sekunjalo anyone, on its own account, it acquired a 25% equity stake in independent media for 163 million rand. It acquired an existing shareholder loan that was in place by the previous owners, the Irish. So they acquired a portion of that for an amount of 133 million. In addition to that, they injected a bridging loan of 285 million rand, which had the effect of leveraging the balance sheet of independent media. But the ultimate purpose of this injection was to declare a special dividend to the previous owners, Irish, as part of raising or coming up to the full total purchase consideration of 2 billion rand. So so in total, PIC's, in addition to that, PIC also provided 215 million rand of the 365 million that was required by the SIM consortium to acquire its 55% stake in independent media. So contrary to the narrative out there that only PIC funded the Sekunjalo or the SIM consortium, the SIM consortium managed to raise 150 million of its own money from its partners. So the 150 plus the 215 was the 365 that it then used to acquire 55% stake in independent media. In total, PIC on day one of the transaction, excluding transaction costs, invested a total of 850 million rand. At the time, 2 billion rand was needed. So Sekunjalo, through its other partners, managed to put together the remaining 1.5 billion rand. So these partners are local and international partners. It's also important to understand that of the 2 billion rand that was raised and paid over to the Irish, PIC has not supported independent media with a single cent, despite the well-documented challenges that independent media has gone through, and these are challenges that are also affecting legacy print media companies. To date, only the Sekunjalo Group has been providing independent media with financial support to grow the business and compete in the marketplace. All the technology drives and technology investment to grow the business was funded with the support of Sekunjalo. Directly and indirectly, since 2013, Sekunjalo at its own risk has provided almost 500 million in support of independent media. And this has allowed all shareholders, including the PRC at the time, to benefit without having put additional funds into the business. It's important to note that it is the Sekunjalo group that also negotiated the price from the initial indicative offer of 2.6 billion, which is accepted by the Irish, to just over 2 billion rand, saving hundreds of millions for all the shareholders when the deal was consummated or concluded. Next slide. There were various attempts to derail the transaction before the deal even crossed the line. So as soon as the deal was announced, beginning of 2013, I think it's around March 2013, various attempts were made by various bodies, and one in particular was from SANEF's chair, Nick Dawes, who made quite a lot of public statements requesting that the deal be prevented by threatening that the Competitions Commission intervene in breaking up the independent media groups, 18 regional and national titles. The hypocrisy with that being that under the Irish, it was still exactly the same stable, but the moment Sekunjalo was coming on board, there was now a need to break up the group. It's also important to note that all of this happened before SIM even owned the Sekunjalo. I think this was about 6 months before the deal actually was concluded. Simultaneously, a consortium led by Mellon Guardian's funders at the time, a US-based media investment fund, also approached Sekunjalo to acquire 3 major publications, the Pretoria News, the Cape Times, and the Mercury, as a condition of SANEM dropping its objection to the sale. So this demonstrates that there was already a coordinated campaign even before independent media was taken over by Sekunjalo to derail the transaction at all costs. Sekunjalo obviously in the same consortium refused to be threatened, and in the end Big Doors apologized, and today SANEM still continues to play a partisan role against independent media, and as been seen by part of a lot of their public comments, and more recently their most recent attack. On the eve of the transaction, this would have been around August 2013, funders linked to the Democratic Alliance also approached the consortium with an offer for 500 million for the consortium to walk away from finalizing the deal. And this was done on the basis that Sekunjalo would 500 million richer without any cost or having to take the deal across the line. So they'll just walk away with 500 million in cash. This was obviously turned down by the SIM consortium, and this was not unusual as during the Irish ownership, there was quite a lot of influence from the DA and other parties in its leaderships within independent media structures, and in certain cases, certain senior editors were essentially told what to do by certain members within the DA leadership. And what was supposed to appear in the papers. Next slide. So notwithstanding these challenges, SIM finally managed to conclude the transaction. But in summary, just to cap up this section, PRC initially committed to 2 billion rand for the transaction, led by competitors Times Media and Naspers, News 24, to prevent a black competitor coming into the space, and to prevent someone that had capability to divert the narrative in the public space. There were even attempts by some senior editorial staff to put together their own consortium and force the Sekunjalo consortium to seal editorial control by the time the deal was concluded. But all of this failed and the deal was eventually went through. Next slide. So post-acquisition, the first few years, independent media faced a very hostile media environment. The detractors, especially competitive media houses, launched an aggressive campaign to undermine independent media and its public reputation, essentially targeting its executive chairman. One of the major media groups had a very well-funded project which was intended to deliver maximum damage on independent media and in particular its chairman. And the idea was to reduce the influence of independent media and its ability to change the narrative in the country. Privileged positions held by executives were changed to a merit-based system, and this obviously led to quite a lot of internal resistance and tension, and many of the privileged executives and editorial people left and joined other media houses, and they continued a lot of their attacks on independent media when they joined some of these other media houses. For a company big as independent media, there were no banking facilities made available to independent media, and today independent media has zero banking facilities, and in a lot of cases, specifically with our production and logistics sides of the business, we're having to fund all of those costs upfront without any form of facilities whatsoever. In addition, other media houses at the time decided to withdraw from various partnerships, including SAPA and various distribution JVs, which ended up leaving independent media with massive cost structures that it had to absorb from these parties. The Irish had also locked independent media into onerous long-term contracts, completing distribution and lease agreements. Some of these contracts still remain and still continue to affect our sustainability. The perfect storm for independent media arose as the rapid shift of audiences from print to digital accelerated around 2015-2016, and with the digital shift and advertising income on a global scale being all absorbed or predominantly absorbed by Google and Facebook. Also during this time, the real GDP for the country was negative, and this is quite a challenge for a media company that thrives on sentiment in the country, as advertising income has a direct correlation to sentiment inside the country and optimism. Next slide. The later years, notwithstanding the challenges sketched out earlier, SIM and its leaders and independent media's leadership was committed to successful transformation of independent media. From an employee's point, we are to ensure that our 1,500 employees within our broad ecosystem were selected on merit, and there were no special privileges based on race, which was the case prior to Sekunjalo's acquisition. There was a deliberate drive to develop young executives and editorial staff within the company to bring in a different perspective in a dynamic and rapidly changing environment. And as an example, in the Cape Town's 150-year history, it was under the leadership of our chairman that the first African editor, Siyavuya, was appointed as the editor of the Cape Times. I think at the time he was 26, he's now 28. And there was a lot of resistance to his appointment, with a lot of people focusing on his lack of experience, even though issue of lack of experience is always an underhanded attack on the fact that it's a person of color. And with all that criticism, to everyone's surprise, he won the Global INMA Award for the Rising Star Award in print media on the African continent. In addition to Sia, we've also appointed quite a lot of young Black journalists, Sefiso Mahangu at the Star, Ayanda Mdluli at the Daily News in KwaZulu-Natal, and Pilani Makanya at the Mercury, also in KwaZulu-Natal. Transformation is not only at editorial level, but also at executive management level. Independent media can claim that it is the only fully transformed media company in South Africa. And this is a far cry from independent media of the past that is rooted in privilege, where senior editorial and executive base did not reflect on the diversity of the country. Independent media today is a non-racial organization and mirrors the diversity of the country in its leadership and also in its editorial structures and newsrooms. Independent media also has one of the highest representation of women in leadership positions in print, and not just in print, but also when compared to other corporate entities. So that is something that, as an organization, we're extremely proud of. The next slide. The next slide just gives you a glimpse of the faces behind independent media, the diversity of our editors and the newsrooms, the balance between males and females, and this is something that we are extremely proud of. Next slide. Independent media's diversity of its editorial and executive since the ownership by the Sekunjalo Consortium, Sekunjalo Independent Media Consortium, has made it the most awarded company on the African continent. It has been the top media company in South Africa despite its limited resources, by winning global awards in video production, in digital and community media, in social justice media, in innovation, and in mobile. It is regarded as a highly innovative media company, and a lot of our innovation ideas have been sought by a lot of our global media partners. The next slide is an indication of the various awards that independent media has won since 2013, and thereafter the various campaigns for media for social change that we've embarked on over the last couple of years that are reflective of the demographic reality and diversity of the communities that we serve and our editorial narrative. So next slide, I won't get into the detail, but it shows the various awards from INMA and one for digital. So these are global media organizations. You can call them the Oscars or the Grammys of the media landscape. And the next slide shows the various campaigns for media for social change that we have embarked on. The Independent Women, the Million Comforts, for women in privileged, underprivileged communities that did not have access to sanitary products. The Do Not Look Away campaign for victims of gender-based violence. The Dignity Project for the homeless people, where we invited homeless people into the newsrooms to actually write about their experiences, and a lot of these experiences found themselves on the front pages of our papers. So that is something that we are extremely proud of. The Racism Stops With Me, and various other campaigns. More recently, our COVID campaign, which was the Heroes Don't Wear Capes, They Wear Masks, which was in support of the country's fight against the COVID pandemic. Next slide. With regards to the press ombudsman, in 2016, independent media withdrew from the Press Council of South Africa, and this was primarily as a result of an impasse between independent media and the Press Council with regards to the reintroduction of a waiver clause. Our view at the time was that the removal of the waiver by the Press Council had unintended consequences of involving the company and other media houses in excessive costly litigation. And this was simply because when a complaint was brought before us, we would put our case forward, but that would then be detrimental to us at a later stage if the matter was taken via a litigation path. So the removal of waiver was quite a negative thing for us. So we then launched our own internal Press Ombudsman office in 2016, at the time headed up by former editor Jovial Rantau, supported by an independent adjudication panel and an appeals panel as well. It is also important to understand that this is nothing unique. The fact that it is new to South Africa does not make it sinister. Around the world, there's a lot of media houses, especially in the UK, where they've got their own internal ombudsman processes. What is important is to ensure that there is adequate glass walls from an editorial governance point to ensure that the ombudsman process and the appeals process can do their work free of any interference from parties and hold the editors to account. More recently, now in 2021, seasoned editor, the former editor of the Mercury, Yugos Nayo, has appointed as the new ombudsman, and the new Press Council Adjudication and Appeals panel comprising of eminent media, legal, and community leaders has been put together. This further entrenches the accountability and transparency of the border. Detailed information regarding the work of the Ombuds Office, complaints procedure, rulings, and other critical information are available on the Independent Media Ombuds website. So this has been done to ensure that there's full transparency with regards to the internal workings of the Press Ombudsman's office, the internal Ombudsman office. Okay, next slide. The next slide just shows the adjudication panel, the Press Council, and the appeals panel that's been put together. Next slide. Section 3, dealing with unlocking value for the PRC and for Sagamata. So the former CEO of the PRC a couple of years back informed Parliament that due to the success of NASPERS, they wanted to replicate something similar with the independent media stable, and at the time we referred to it as a black Naspers. Naspers was financially struggling in 2021 until it struck gold with its investment in Tencent, and has become probably the most successful investment the PRC has made, and not just the PRC, but a lot of asset managers in the country. In parallel to this, Sekunjalo, over the years, because independent media did not have the resources to invest in its own technology platforms, Sekunjalo had been making its own investments in e-commerce, digital media, syndication services, application software, and various other tech media investments. And these were housed in a vehicle called Sagamata. A year before the 5-year anniversary of the first term loan that was due to the PRC, the PRC invited independent media and SIM to present to it its strategy for an exit for the PRC out of the SIM consortium and out of independent media. This was necessary as it had become apparent for some time that they would not realize value in the ordinary course. And by ordinary course is through independent media paying its loans, declaring dividends into the SIM consortium so that the SIM consortium can also settle the PRC loans. So there was a need to look at totally different approach and strategy to enable a PRC exit. So Sekunjalo, at the invitation of the PRC, went and presented its thinking around a content-to-commerce strategy. And this content strategy was housed in Sagamata. This culminated over the following months with an offer and an acceptance by PRC, whereby Sagamata acquired all of its claims in PRC and
Chairman, I would like to raise a point of order.
Okay, point of order.
Chairman, in my years in this committee, I've never seen a single presentation ever go on for more than 90 minutes. How long more is this presentation going to go on for?
On my side, there's about 10 minutes left.
Okay. Can you speak to the slides, Mr. Takuja?
Okay. So I'll speak through the slides. I'll speak through the slides. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so after the
next 9 minutes.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chair, like we're almost at the end, Mr. Chair. So after 8 months of engagements, the JSC and Sagamata, the JSC was, the JSC approved the listing of Sagamata on the main board. However, due to relentless media pressure and the influence of hidden hands, the JSC pulled the listing of pulled the listing due to various due to like a minor issue which we won't get into the details. Sagamata Technologies has since applied to SAB to list on an international stock exchange as a primary listing, as there's lack of support in South Africa. Sagamata has applied to the Reserve Bank in November 2018 for a primary listing. And despite the Reserve Bank having initially indicated in 2018 that their approval would take no more than a few months, Sagamata is still waiting on an approval 2 years after. SAB has now indicated that we now have to put in a new application which will then be submitted to Treasury. This delay has been prejudicial to Sagamata Independent Media and the PRC, as it was our only way of realizing value for Sagamata and for the benefit of all the shareholders, including the PRC. and is indicative of possible hidden hands halting the progress of this listing and unlocking value for all parties. Next slide. So I'm going to skip the next slides that speak to Sagamata being a multi-sided tech media company, but just want to impress that it is important for the PRC and SAB to work with Sagamata and independent media to ensure a successful listing for Sagamata to realize value. And perhaps in terms of a plea to SCOF, if you can assist us with understanding why there is the SAB hasn't given Sagamata the go-ahead to list, even though over the years approval has been granted to other companies like Naspers, which listed on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. And it appears as if there's different rules for different parties, even though in terms of the Reserve Bank's own provisions and guidelines and policies, we do qualify to get approval to list offshore. So the next slides I'm going to skip up until we get to section 4, which is the conclusion. So in conclusion, the PRC under the leadership has taken a very hostile approach to independent media and Sagamata. It is important that it is clear that independent media is an important voice in media diversity, and its narrative of factual-based news, truth, and diversity has ruffled many feathers. There is now a desperate attempt to either launch a hostile assault on independent media for a takeover of the business, or failing that, to destroy the business completely, so that there is no competitor narrative to other mainstream media. There's a direct attack. This is a direct attack on media freedom and undermines our constitution. And it is unfathomable how the PIC has targeted independent media and has left all other media houses alone in its public statements and legal impositions. It is odd that the PRC, claiming to act for pensioners, has instituted summons against some independent media and has not offered to work with the independent media team and executives and and directors to support the businesses and also attempt to protect media freedom and journalism in South Africa. They seem to be working with parties like SANEF who have ulterior motives. It is important to stress that SANEF does not represent media in South Africa, contrary to the perception that they create. Not a single independent media editor is a member of SANEF, yet we are the largest print media group in the country. SCOF can be provided with all the relevant letters received by independent media and SIM from the PRC and other gross misrepresentations that have been made with regards to independent media in the public domain. So we're thankful to Minister Tito Mboweni for the invitation, and we're also thankful to the chair and to you members for allowing us to present our side of the story to this committee. Our country needs diversity and media freedom. Our country needs media diversity and media freedom, and we should, together with Parliament, resist all attempts to hinder the diversity of media ownership and transformation. We should work together for the future of our stakeholders, which includes the Government Employees Pension Fund and our 1,500 employees, journalists, to ensure that media is sustainable for journalism and journalism continues in our country. We know that we've exposed uncomfortable truths, including most recently the PPE corruption, which robbed our healthcare workers of valuable equipment at a critical time. We know in doing so and in exposing powerful individuals and their associates, we anger powerful people in the establishment to shut us down. And the PRC is being used as a blunt instrument against independent media. This country will be poorer if all media has a singular narrative and there is no diversity. We have to prevent our country and those in leadership and power from exercising authoritarianism, since the consequences of that can be seen by many countries around the world, including our close neighbors, where media freedom is a rare commodity. In summary, we have explained the media landscape before 94, the acquisition of independent media from the Irish, and the resistance to change of media ownership and diversity. We've explained the transformation journey of independent media and the excellence in awards. We've shown that the PRC did not invest 2 billion rand. The Sekunjalo consortium and its partner invested more than 1.15 billion towards the 2 billion rand purchase consideration, and the PRC put in 850 across its exposures in independent media and SIM. We've shown that it is only Sekunjalo through Sekunjalo group companies that have supported independent media since the acquisition for the benefit of all parties, including the PRC. We did not embark on a retrenchment drive during the traumatic COVID period, and we've kept all of our employees employed. We've shown that the PRC's conversion of shares and loans into Sagamata is a positive exit strategy that unlocks value, and we await the SAB permission to list Sagamata on an international stock exchange so that we can commence with a strategy to realize value for Sagamata and unlock value for the PRC. And in conclusion, let's work together to have a diversity of views, and we leave you with a few quotes. Let 100 flowers bloom and let 100 schools of thought content by Mao Zedong, and tell no lies and claim no evil practice by Amilcar Cabral. We thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it from my side.
Thanks, Mr. Tagudzo, for the presentation. Let's move to the PIC. PIC, any response? Alan, is PIC in the platform?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much.
Mr. Stoll, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Able Sitole from the PIC. I am with the executive team. I just would like to apologize on behalf of the chair of the PIC board who couldn't make the meeting. But we have been here and listening to all the presentations that were made. Chair, I would like to say to committee, we have heard the presentation that they've made, that there's been a number of factual assertions that we are not in a position to respond to at this point in time, but the facts are there. And to the extent that the committee would want us to revert back and respond to some of those factual statements that have been made, we're more than happy to present those to the Standing Committee on Finance. There's been reference to a number of issues pertaining to the findings of the commission.
Hello, Mr.
Chair. Yes, Chair.
Mr. Louis can't hear you. He's asking that you speak much bit louder. You raise the voice.
All right. Just move the device. All right. Can you hear me now, Chair?
Mr. Louis, can you hear Mr. Stoll?
Yes, Mr. Sitole, that's much better. Sorry, I'm much younger than you, but my ears are bad.
I apologize for that.
Okay.
Chair, I was saying that we've had a lot of the factual submissions that have been made on the three the presentations that have been made to SCOF. We're currently not in a position to respond to some of the factual information that has been presented, but we're more than happy at a later stage, if the committee so requires, to provide responses to the facts that have been presented that we do not necessarily support and might not be supported with the information that we have. There's been reference to the findings of the commission. We cannot respond to that. Those, I think, are publicly available. And there are aspects of those that we do not believe can be answered by us, but the commission report is available publicly in the appropriate website of the Department of Justice. But we can allude to a number of areas where some of the information that's been provided does not accord with what our understanding of what the commission has provided. I would like to just give a couple of examples. On page 24 of the report, the special reference to the statements that were made at the commission by the CEO of SA Home Loan that specifically deals with matters of our employee, and of course with reference to Mr. Maponya himself. And I think just to read directly, it says there, just to paraphrase when Mr. Maponya is involved, Mr. Maponya had approached a colleague, Mr. Dlamini, and said that SA Home Loan should irregularize what were called arising fees. This speaks to a specific finding on the SA Home Loan matter. So I just wanted to point out that there is specific reference to Mr. Maponya in a recommendation. Of the
point of order, Chair. Can I correct the statement of the CEO?
No. Wait, Mr. Maponya. It is now time for PIC to respond. We will allow you when we come to item 7. So for now, allow the PIC to respond.
Chair, on page 201, the Mpati Commission report, paragraph 63 to 64, it says, Mr. Maponya claimed in his affidavit that his company, MMI, was owed an amount of 45 million by the PIC. The amount alleged due relates to fees for facilitating a transaction concluded between the PIC and SA Home Loan, an entity set up to provide affordable housing to members of the GEPF. And then it goes to say it is clear that the issues raised by Mr. Maponya in his affidavit have no relevance whatsoever to the Commission's terms of reference. The Commission has no authority to decide on whether or not Mr. Maponya or MMI is or is not owed any money by the PIC. In any event, Mr. Maponya averts that his affidavit that on 11 April 2019, a summons was issued by his attorneys out of the Gauteng Division of the High Court, claiming a payment of the amount alleged due to MMI. The defendants cited in the summons are the PIC, the GEPF, and SA Home Loan. The matter is being defended clearly, therefore, Mr. Maponya's claim is not covered by the Commission's terms of reference, and the Commission is not empowered to consider it. So that's important too. And there are a number of instances, Chair, we haven't had enough time to actually spend a lot of time to look at those, but we'll be more than happy to actually indicate where there is specific reference in the Commission itself in terms of the matters that we are actually taking. So we're not taking matters purely because we have any agenda against anybody. We're taking matters either through the investigations of the PIC or findings that we've been recommended to follow up by the Commission itself, that we can almost verbatim refer to based on the Commission's report itself. Just to reiterate, nobody has to take my word for what I'm saying. This is a publicly available document. So the Mpati Commission report is publicly available, and any member of the public can read for themselves what's actually provided there. Just to restate, we have no agenda against any of our investee companies. The fact that we've invested in them kind of indicates that we supported the initial vision as presented, if those presented were actually viable. If we have taken any action, it can't be any action to destroy the value in the investments that we've made. And to the extent that we're taking action is either the terms and conditions that were agreed when the investments were made have not been adhered to, and we are taking the actions that we are taking to actually defend and try to secure the investments that we've made. We have no agenda against anybody. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Stolle, for your response. As you have indicated that you would like to be given enough time that you come back at a later stage to respond to certain issues that were raised during the two presentations. I think we'll allow that. I see Mr. Mrolong is raising his hand before we move to Treasury.
No, Chairperson. I wanted to suggest that we avoid a piecemeal approach. If the PIC is unable to give a response on variety of allegations made by companies or entities that it has invested in, that we allow them, given the voluminous nature of the presentations which have been made, that we allow them sufficient time to return to the committee and respond to all allegations made against them. I was going to suggest that when I had the CEO indicating that they would respond to some of the allegations made, I was going to suggest that that we don't adopt that approach. That if they are in no position to respond to all allegations, then we accord them the necessary space and time to return to the committee and respond to all the issues raised. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mrolo, for that suggestion. Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to check, are we going to take the Treasury first and then have an opportunity to engage with what we've heard, or are we going now?
I thought we should take Treasury first.
No problem.
For 50 minutes, then we come to item 7, where we'll engage the two presentations. Taking into consideration what has been suggested by Honorable Mrolo. Treasury, any take on the two presentations? Is Treasury in the platform? So that if not, we have to proceed to the next item.
Yes, Chair, I'm just searching to see if Momo is still on. He logged in earlier.
Sorry, Chair, no, I don't deal with this. I'm just following the discussion. I don't know if my colleagues are here who will respond from assets and liability management. If not, it's...
Who's your colleague responsible for PIC?
Well, Supriso is on the board, but I think Mpati is here. I don't know if...
Confirmed I am here.
Okay. Ms. Mpati, any response so far?
Morning, Chair, and to all the members. From the National Treasury's point of view, we appreciate the information that has been shared with the committee. For a lot of it, it is new in terms of how it's been conveyed in this, from this perspective, and we will relate to the principles for assessment and consideration. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move to item 7, deliberations by committee members. Committee members will indicate through the platform if they want to ask clarity-seeking questions or make comments. I see Honorable Louis Umhlonishwa Skosana, Umhlonishwa Abrams, Akhbare Vessels, Honorable Mrolong, Alan and Tewu. Those are the 5 hands I can see from. Honorable Shivambu, Yeah, for now, let's take those who have raised their hands. Honorable Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chair. You know, my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter has a favorite book. One of her favorites is Alice in Wonderland, and I read it to her often. And a lot of the presentation that I heard today reminded me of that book where nothing makes sense. Up is down and in is out and hot is cold. And that is presented as logic. But actually it's a fantasy novel. And so much of what we heard here today is a fantasy novel. The conspiracy theory that is presented as analysis to explain so much of what is happening is that there's this enormous conspiracy involving everyone against these companies. It's the JSC, it's Naspers, it's the PIC, it's government, it's the media, it's the DA. Everyone is working together to bring down this champion of righteousness and justice, the Sekunjalo group and all of its connected and related investments, including independent media. Of course, that's just nonsense. That fantasy exists in your mind. It isn't a statement of fact. There's no evidence to support that. It's just rubbish. And the truth of the matter is, the reason why your companies are failing, the reason why readers are deserting you, and why this once proud bastion of a media company, of a liberal media company, is now just a smoking wreck of its former self. The truth of the matter is because you have no integrity. And people can see that. People are not stupid. So you might think that it will work just to explain away every fact as racism. But no one's buying that story anymore. That may have worked 10 years ago. It doesn't work on South Africa anymore. So when facts and integrity and truth are inconvenient, you lean on racism. And so you join these dots and you do these things, this conspiracy sums in your mind, 1 + 1 = 5. But the truth is, it's your own integrity that is to blame. You have none. Mr. Survey has no integrity in the public eye. Your company has no integrity in the public eye, and that is why your companies are failing. Now, we were invited here today to listen to your response to the Mpati Commission. That is why you were invited and given an opportunity, a massive opportunity. I've never seen a company make such a long presentation to this committee. But not once in your report did you actually deal with any factual assertion in the Mpati Commission. Not once. I listened carefully and made notes of what you said. You didn't deal with the agenda item at all. It was just a tissue of conspiracy and fantasy again. Now, I think that the PIC's response is basically perfect, because what you have here is a legal dispute. If you say that some of the things that you have claimed in your presentation are factual, then present them to the court and let the court determine whether they are factual or not. We are not a court of law. That is not our job. The proper forum for the resolution of a factual dispute in a commercial matter is court, not parliament. You came here to talk about the Mpati Commission, and you did not do that. Now, the other thing you fundamentally misunderstand is that you would like us, in your summary, you've asked us to give operational instructions to a separate branch of government. I'm afraid you fundamentally misunderstand the separation of powers in South Africa. You are now speaking to the legislature. Our primary job is to hold the executive to account. The executive in the person of the minister and in the department of the National Treasury. It is not our job and is not our place to issue operational instructions to separate arms of government. And yet this is what you would have us do. Now, it is extremely concerning to me that someone or an organization that calls itself a leading voice in political journalism in South Africa doesn't understand that basic separation of powers in Parliament. One thing I do agree with you on is that we should have a diversity of media views in South Africa. We do not want to have a complete uniformity of opinion. you say that you are an important voice in that media diversity, but the facts say otherwise. It is not any government conspiracy or corporate conspiracy or opposition-led conspiracy that has led to the absolute precipitous collapse and ruin of your readership numbers. That is because media consumers, ordinary people, South Africans, have seen through it, have seen through the smoke that you're trying to blow. So far from an important voice, you've become an utterly irrelevant voice in media diversity and competition. And it is no one else to blame for that decline but yourselves. You must hold up a mirror and ask yourself, what have you done to journalism in South Africa and the very proud tradition of journalism in your group to destroy it so thoroughly and completely? I will leave it at that. I've got many other questions because your report, your contribution was voluminous, as someone has said. But I would just like to highlight again, you were invited here to respond to the Mpati Commission. You did not do that. You didn't do that at all. You have not told us what your objection to the report is. You have not mentioned or raised a single item raised in the report that you take issue with. And so, frankly, I think the best response for the National Treasury and the PIC would be to proceed with their court cases and to ignore the fantasy you have spoken here today. Thank you, Chairman.
Are you done, Honorable Lewis?
Oh, I've got a lot more, but I'm done for now.
Okay. You'll come back with a follow-up at a later stage. Honorable Skosan?
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and greetings to honorable members, the Treasury, and all other entities that are present. I want to second the earlier proposal made by the Honorable Murulu that since the PIC is saying they need more time to be able to respond to all the issues that have been raised today. I think for us to engage when we have not had fully the side of the story of the PIC, I think it's a bit difficult. So I would, in terms of that proposal, add that let's reschedule for another day and have the PIC fully prepared to respond to all the issues that have been raised by Mr. Maponya, by Ayo, by independent media, and then so that we are able to gauge the presentations that were made today versus the responses that we shall have received from the PIC. Because for now, I think we will be engaging while the PIC is here, but it has not responded fully to the issues that they've raised in our presence. So it's better to also hear their side. Then it will be easy for us to then gauge and then come in and see who's right, who's wrong, which process is right, which process is not right. And well, the question that I would like to ask from the question that I would like to ask to Mr. Stolley is it's on the issue of the litigation. Is that at what stage it's the litigation process? I think that if we can know that, perhaps that can assist us to know as to whether how to approach this. Is it at its infant stage or it's towards conclusion? Can we wait for those processes or what? Maybe if we can know at what stage is the litigation process, perhaps that can also assist us. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Skosana. Also seconding Honorable Murolong's suggestion. Honorable Abraham.
Yes, Chair, thank you so much. Chair, I would also like to join the other members who have welcomed the presentations, though some with reservations, but I think the proposal is acceptable because for me, the Maponya rep, for example, was too general and maybe a bit vague as well in terms of the detail that we would have wanted to hear. However, they do present their own reasons for that in terms of having written to us a year ago and so on and so forth, and how this particular meeting has been overtaken by events. However, I do also think that based on the earlier proposal to have them come back again, they could come back better prepared, because I think one of the reasons why Mr. Maponya wanted to respond to Mr. Sithole from PIC, for example, was maybe a bit of information that they did not necessarily give. The difference between them and Sekunjalo and the others is really the fact that Sekunjalo also went into a lot of detail. And I think part of what Honorable Hill Lewis has said, there's some truth, because you find, for example, statements like Sanef had ulterior motives, and you don't want to, you don't get exactly what the ulterior motives are. That kind of statement sounded to me as well more like a kind of a conspiracy theory. And I think having understood the purpose for them being here and having also to be better prepared, I think it's not only PIC. For me, it's just that PIC was able to say, listen, we are not ready. Can we come again? But I also think that the companies that have presented here are equally ill prepared for this meeting. However, as they go away, I don't want to take away the right of members to ask them the necessary questions. Because, for example, for me, it doesn't come out very clearly in terms of their agenda, because the funds that are with PIC are funds that belong to the working class. So it hasn't been clear in their own objective what it is that they are doing for the ordinary and the poor. And the other question that I have maybe a bit related to the first, because their engagement with us, for example, should have something to do with how they service the people out there. How do they hope to improve that aspect of what they are doing? And I hear also that they do say that PIC has created barriers for, that's what I said, for example. And that kind of detail would be of interest to us, because we cannot be in a position to intervene if we do know the kind of barriers that are addressed, for example. And there's another wide statement about the PIC being used as an instrument against independent media. that kind of detail also really is warranted at that level. Unfortunately, Honorable Chairperson, the time limit for this particular meeting is 12 midday. And I thought that it would be proper that we give them some food for thought so that in the meeting where PIC would be responding, they are also there and give clarity on the matters that we are currently raising. I thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Abraham, making an emphasis that we'll have to have a second meeting where PIC will respond and the two stakeholders will also be allowed to have a say. Honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I agree with the colleagues and especially with Jordan that we must remember, one, that report made certain findings, and those findings are there. Chair, I'm going to switch off my camera because I see my internet is unstable. Fact of the matter is there are findings, and we did not hear anything today to actually address any of those findings. We heard a lot of rhetoric, but we didn't hear facts. We heard a lot of conspiracy theories, but we didn't hear facts. And it is really actually disgusting, Chairperson, that under the guise of transformation, there is a shift away or an attempt to shift the attention away from the failures and the irregularities of especially SIM. And Chairperson, what must be remembered is we are dealing here with pensioners' hard-earned money. And that is why there was a Mpati Commission of Inquiry. That is why there were recommendations made in this regard. And some of those recommendations, especially with regards to SIM and Sekunjalo, was that there should be a forensic investigation, further forensic investigations. And I would want to hear from Mr. Sitoli that he just reminds us how far those investigations are, especially in terms of those transactions. And the fact is those investigations are there to bring alight the actual facts in this regard, not a lot of rhetoric and a lot of conspiracy theories of people that are against free media and are against this and are against this and politically motivated nonsense. Chairperson, there were irregularities. It was found by the Mpati Commission. We didn't hear anything today to actually say that there's no factual basis for it. There was sufficient liquidity at the PIC to fund the relevant subscription. PIC policies were disregarded. The concentration of risk in one group was found to be irregular. Those are some of the findings of the Mpati Commission. And that cannot be derailed or disregarded just because we're talking about a transformative agenda and about racism and about going as far back as 1948. That will not solve the situation we are in. Chairperson, yes, so I agree that there should be a further engagement, but actually the fact of the matter is there's court actions going on. Those court actions should go further. The investigation should go further, and we should look at the facts at the end of the day to engage on a lot of things that are currently in the courts and currently being forensically investigated will not actually serve any purpose. But that's my point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Vessels. Honorable Mrolo.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think part of what I had wanted to talk about has been sufficiently addressed by Honorable Abrams. It was related to Mr. Maponya returning to the committee to give us a a broader picture of what his presentation would have been. But I also am mindful of the fact that there are court processes that are ensuing. And I think that we need to take a dim view as a committee to disaggregate matters that are before the courts so that we allow them time to be ventilated in the courts of law. But I also wanted to raise a concern. You know, in one of the presentations that was made by independent media, the breakdown of the relationship of trust between independent media and the PIC was imputed to a lot of other things, amongst which is the fact that there has been expose of wrongdoing, particularly with respect to PPE scandals, which are quite recent. And I think that it is unfair that these challenges are ascribed to recent scandals that have seen the light of public, particularly because in their own presentation, the independent media makes an important point that this has been a cumulative a breakdown of a relationship of trust. It is not something new. And I agree with members that if we want to strengthen our representation to this committee, we need to avoid conspiracy theories that have got nothing to do with the Mpati Commission. So I also want to caution the fact that we can't raise things that we know are unrelated to the findings of the Mpati Commission and bring them to this forum. But I'm also glad that we all agree that there must be a session where the PIC would come back and respond to these allegations. I don't know whether we will accord the first presenters the same opportunity or whether there'll be an exchange of documents. It will be up to you to make that ruling, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Honorable Mrolo. Honorable Shwamo.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I think we must deal with broad policy issues that I think bear reference to the presentations that came here today, which I think could have been phrased and framed differently so that we're able to give guidance. I think you're correct, Chair, when you opened the meeting that as Parliament, we can listen to members of the public and companies here in South Africa that have got concerns on one issue or another that relate to public entities. I think we've heard that before. In relation to the PIC, they have actually held a very long inquiry in terms of what exactly happened with Steenhoff and got the representatives of Steenhoff on several occasions to come and speak, sometimes for the whole day on the dynamics. They will then got to satisfy ourselves and recommended the process of what should happen moving forward. And I think IO and independent media should be informed that this is a parliamentary committee process. It's not the Minister of Finance who invited you here. Because I saw in both presentations, you say that you want to thank the Minister of Finance. It's the committee that took a decision that as part of processing the Mpati Commission report, let us listen to the companies that have been affected, but also let us listen to the companies that could have written to the committee to seek audience in terms of the issues that concern you. So to thank the Minister of Finance is not a member of the Standing Committee on Finance. We oversee him. It's our obligation, and then we pass legislations that are sometimes brought by him or sometimes we initiate and have to be implemented by National Treasury. I think that context must be clear so that we do not repeat that anywhere in terms of how this is dealt with. The key principles, 3, Chair, which we have to then deal with, I think we have raised this several times before, which some arise out of the Commission report and all of those things. One is that the PIC should have to give us a policy perspective on entities that receive multiple loans or deals from the PIC. So that is one, to say that just how many times can the PIC invest in one corporation or corporations that are associated with similar individuals? That is important to then deal with whatever issue that we can deal with. And of course, it cannot be applied retrospectively. So if it has happened already, we'll then have to be given a detail of how do we consolidate on that so that there aren't risks that later on accrue into the government employees pension fund, which majority of the times is the one which the PIC invests on behalf of. That is one. But two, we need to discuss the issue of the quantums of just how much money can the PIC invest in one entity. And I'm raising this not in relation to what Mr. Maponya is saying and what IO and independent media are dealing with here. Because even in terms of just how many times should the PIC relate with these different companies, if you were to check the PIC's exposure to Remgro companies, to unrupert companies, it's a lot in almost all entities, whether it be Discovery or MMI or RMB, FNB, and all of those things there. What is the exposure of the PIC? How safe are our resources in entities that are controlled from one point? If you were to check the PIC's exposure to NARSPAS, like in NARSPAS, it's more than 250 billion rands worth of investments in just one level, and there's still exposure to multi-choice, to other entities that are associated with NARSPAS. I think those broad policy issues have to be clarified so that we have a consistent frame upon which we monitor and oversee the activities of the PIC. So it must not just be reduced to those that are appearing now in terms of all these issues. And then the other issue that we have to deal with is the issue of the PIC's role in transformation and de-racialization of the economy. That must be a clear agenda that must not be apologetic about. The Constitution even obliges us to do that we have an obligation as Parliament to pass legislations and policies. In Section 9.2, that must in a balance be passed, like the racist, nonsensical apartheid system which excluded our people from economic participation. So the transformation agenda of the PIC must not be understated. In terms of transformation on different sectors in the media, so as part of transformation of the media and diversification of the media, it was correct for the PIC to invest or to empower an entity which was going to play a role in the media space, which previously was white-owned, almost exclusively, actually exclusively white-owned and controlled. That we need the diversity of voices there. And under the current South African circumstances, it is only the PIC that can meaningfully guide and inform the transformation agenda. Actually, in almost all sectors of the economy, the PIC is the only instrument that can play a meaningful role, because the private corporations do not fund black people, do not want to give or expose the huge amounts of money to black people. And the PIC, in a manner that is sustainable and later on beneficial in terms of what happens in a balanced way, should play a transformation role, including what I understand was raised yesterday about mandating a bigger number of black asset managers to manage some of the assets that the PIC is investing on behalf of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, on behalf of the GPF, and on behalf of the Composition Fund and all of those other clients that the PIC relies on. I think those are the issues that we then have to deal with as broad principles. Now, the PIC says they can't deal with some of the issues that have been raised here, and they are requesting that they should be given time to do so. If they can't, that's fine. But I think that let's give a template to the presentations of Mr. Maponya, of IO, of independent media, to say that in your presentation, let's leave the politics for now. We'll deal with that at a different platform. So some of the issues we agree that there's of course an attempt to suppress alternate perspective in the media space. Let's deal with that in a different platform. What we must deal with as the committee is one, how much did the PIC invest in each of the companies that are associated with the Mr. Maponya, independent media, and IO? That is one. And then two is what were the terms of that injection by the PIC, and what were the terms and conditions of both the loans and the equity contributions or equity injections that were made there? And then three, whether those loans are being serviced, and if they are not being serviced, on what basis? And then four, on whether the differences that exist between the PIC and IO, or the PIC and independent media, the PIC and Mr. Maponya, does that require a litigation process, which in most instances is wasteful. It's wasteful for both sides in terms of the legal costs that are going to be involved there, but also in majority of the times, it devalues the asset that is being litigated upon. The independent media has illustrated that as a result of what they deem to be a negative pursuit by the PIC, the real value of the asset is declining. They don't have banking accounts and a variety of things. They've been criminalized in all these spaces, in the JSE, a variety of other consequences that come with such. Is litigation, court litigation, the only way to resolve the problems that are existing between the entities and the PIC? Isn't there a better way of settling on this in terms of what happens? And of course, we oversee the executive and all its entities, but we have an obligation as Parliament as well to guide that some of these things do not need litigation. Perhaps let's get all these factual issues. Let's leave the other things. Let's get the factual issues. What are the terms of reference? What are the loan conditionalities? And then we will be able, as the committee, to then say to the PIC and the entities that are here, that can't you resolve these issues outside of litigation, like where there must be a winner and a loser? Because I think the ultimate purpose on both sides is, of course, from the business sides, you want to make profit, and when you have repaid the loan, the PIC must make sure that the assets that they are managing on behalf of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, on behalf of the Government Employees Pension Fund, is secure. And so the PIC must also take that into consideration of, aren't we risking the asset in a way that is going to negatively impact the asset itself and therefore decline the value of what ultimately workers are going to benefit, hypothetically. And to the PIC must also take into consideration that our pursuit of these corporations what value is it adding to transformation? And of course, if there is wrongdoing, there must be a way of dealing with wrongdoing in the proper court process. But if these are issues which you can then deal with, you have to take that approach. Because in one of the documents which I've just seen now, shared here in the email by the committee secretary, Mr. Maponya is writing a letter to the Supreme Court of Appeal, to the Chief Justice, to the Speaker, to literally everyone, to the Minister of Finance, to say that the PIC is refusing to comply to court order. And those are some of the issues that we must then have to deal with separately as Parliament, to say that if the courts are even failing to enforce a cordial relationship, perhaps we need to facilitate a proper framework, even if it is not as the PIC can voluntarily identify someone who can say that, how do we save the deals that are in distress in a way that is going to save money for the PIC or on behalf of course of its clients that it's managing those assets on behalf of in a manner that's sustainable. So instead of, and of course, I know the temptation of what the independent media did of talking the politics behind the current problems, because Parliament is a political platform. But I think that there is a way of risking the investments that have been made by the PIC, whether it's equity injection or loans that has been made in a much more suitable and appropriate way. Let us just stick to what were the loans, what were the equity injections, what are the terms, are those being serviced, what can be done, are the conditions permitting for that to be serviced, and all of those things. There are a variety of challenges in terms of what got to happen. I mean, like it's sometimes legitimate to listen to a concern that says that maybe there was COVID-19 and the business that focuses on this couldn't do business, so we're unable to service the loan, or because of the crisis that happened with the importation of chickens, Daybreak, which is one of the entities which Mr. Maponya says in the letter here, couldn't make the necessary inroads. If it's making inroads, how do we settle that? And ourselves as members of Parliament, our obligation is that the monies that the PIC invests on behalf of the UIF, on behalf of the GPF and all the other clients is insulated, is protected. And this does not need unnecessary agitation and attack on each other when we can find a way of handling it in a much more suitable and sustainable way. A bit like that, Chair, I hope that if we agree on the postponement of this engagement, we must not postpone by more than a week. So within a week's time, we can then request the companies to, let's draft a template of what are we looking for from the companies that are coming to present, and ideally send that to the PIC before the meeting starts. Then the PIC gives substantial response so that we do not postpone a postponed meeting. And then we'll then be able to give our own recommendations in terms of what do we think is the most efficient way to deal with all of these issues. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, thanks, Honorable Shwambo, and other members, colleagues who have asked clarity, seeking questions and made comments. The general agreement is that we have another engagement where we afford the PIC enough time to prepare for responses. They will have to respond to the issues raised by Mr. Maponya, the Sekunjalo group, that's IO and independent media, as well as issues that have been raised by members when they were asking clarity questions and making comments. And what we should indicate is that this is not an inquiry like how we are dealing with other matters. Here we are dealing with issues which come to stakeholders which are seeking an attention of the Standing Committee on Finance, unlike how we are dealing with the Steenhoff issues. So here is more like dealing with a petition, unlike on the Steenhoff matter, where it's a full inquiry. That's the reason why in that inquiry we have enlisted the services of law enforcement agencies. Every time we meet them, we have the law enforcement agencies and other regulatory bodies. So we wanted to clarify the two. And also our responsibility is to play oversight on the executive and its organs. And in this regard, it is the PIC. And as members have reiterated, it will have been in the best interest of both the borrower and the lender, if they can find an amicable solution to deal with the challenges that they have. Because what is at stake here is the workers' pensions. If the parties can find amicable solutions to the challenges that they have, we'll welcome that as Parliament. And I believe that the borrowers will show cause that they are prepared to pay back the money that they've borrowed from PIC. Of course, the PIC also has the responsibility to make sure, as the lender, they get back the money that they have borrowed to, lended to different businesses. So the commitment should be there from the borrowers. So we'll meet again, and as indicated, Mr. Maponya did not have a full presentation like that of the Sekunjalo group. If in the next engagement, we would like to make another presentation, but not a long one, so that he should not think that he has been denied an opportunity to make a better presentation to the commission, to the committee, because this is a people's parliament. Everybody should be happy with the outcome. We are not a court of law where there will be someone who will lose the case and the other who will have won. We don't make judgments here. We want to find solutions that will assist government moving forward. But also want to indicate to honorable members that as much as stakeholders are not members of parliament, the rules of parliament also cover them, that when they come to parliament, they should be treated with dignity. I think the use of the word that Dr. Sev is a man who doesn't have dignity, integrity, is not right. If we can allow him to respond here, he will say all sorts of other things to the member that has raised that. Let's debate in a manner that we also protect and respect the dignity of our stakeholders or members of the public who come and appear as. So that's what I'm appealing to members, that when we raise issues, let's raise them in the manner that we're dealing with adults who also have feelings. They don't have right to interject and howl like members of parliament, but the chairperson should actually protect them. So I thought that matter is a matter that we should consider. So generally, we are all agreeing that we'll have to reschedule. We'll look at the program with the Secretariat. We have got a very tight program and see as to when can we allow the PIC, Sekunjalo and Mr. Maponya to come back, get the responses, and then allow the Sekunjalo and Mr. Maponya will also be allowed to respond after PIC will have responded, and then give to honorable members to ask clarity-seeking questions, make responses, and then we agree on the way forward. So unless there are other issues that members want to raise, I see Honorable Shivambu is raising the hand. There is also somebody called Wipilos iPad. I don't know who's Wipilos iPad, and Honorable Lewis in that order. Ayo, is there an issue that you want to raise before we close the meeting?
Mr. Chair. Just firstly, I want to thank on behalf of the Sekunjalo Group the opportunity by yourself as the Honourable Member and other members for giving IO and independent media the opportunity to present, their side of the story. I think it's important to say to you, it was not the committee that invited us, it was we as Sekunjalo Group that wrote to the committee requesting to be there and to present after the Honourable Minister of Finance had made the suggestion of the other side of the story. At no stage in our letter to the SCOF was there mention of the Mpati Commission. In fact, it was really to hear our side of the story. The second point I want to make is that we agree with honourable members, and I think there have been many wise words that were said here today, that we should do everything possible to find amicable solutions, and in fact to make sure that there's value for the pensioners and the GEPF in particular and the PIC. And we will continue to engage with the PIC. I think it's so important that we engage with them to find these solutions, notwithstanding the difficulties that we have presented to date. I also think it's important, Honourable Chair and Member, that there's not been a single dispute of fact of the presentations that were put forward today on the part of either IO or independent media. No one has disputed any singular fact in these presentations. So I know that there's been various words that have been said, but I want to perhaps conclude to say that there are many legal issues, and that's not always the way to deal with these matters. As far as the Sekunjalo Group is concerned, there is absolutely no loan from the PIC to any of either independent. Certainly, there's no loan to IO. It's an investment, and to independent media, it's also an investment. So there's no loan outstanding to the PIC as far as we are concerned. Of course, the PIC may differ with that point of view. I think lastly, it's important to say, during apartheid, the architects of media from Naspers and Caxton, others, were people that were lauded for their integrity, for defending the brutal apartheid system, which is a crime against humanity. So I'm not surprised when people like myself defend our people and transformation, suddenly that's not integrity. You see, integrity is when you defend apartheid and its brutality. Integrity is not, according to certain people, when you defend the people of this country. I am extremely proud that I defend the people of this country. And by the way, if you've noticed at all, our readership, viewership of our online titles have increased tremendously, more than 50% in the last while. The only reason for a drop in circulation in recent times is due to the impact of COVID and a supply side situation. And you'll see that supply side is now increased, but still we have a readership in excess of 5 million people in print. We have a readership in excess of 10 million online. That is by far the largest in this country. So clearly your statistics are just based on the COVID statistic, not on a statistic over a period of time. We are very happy to bring that information to the fore. And we're also very happy that we're able to have had this opportunity to present to SCOF. Once again, we don't get involved in personal issues. We stick to the facts, we stick to issues which are not disputed, and we'll continue to do so. And we'll continue to strive for transformation in the ICT sector, continue to strive for transformation also in the media sector. We thank you, Honourable Member and Honourable Members, for your valuable contribution. We will...
Okay. Okay, thanks, Dr. Seth. Mr. Abupilo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, honourable members. Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity of inviting our client, Mr. Sekepe Maponya, to address yourselves. And on the next hearing, we will give a more detailed presentation, and especially in line with what Honorable Shivambo has indicated on what it is that would specifically be required. However, Mr. Chair, before I go away, I would just like to state that, and we will give more clarity once the PIC has responded. In as far as Mr. Maponya and his entities, MMI, I want to make it very clear that the Mpati Commission did not make any findings of wrongdoing against Mr. Maponya. What Mr. Sithole seeks to do is to read selective parts of the report, that is the presentations by both the CEO of SA Home Loans and Standard Bank, who sought to impugn the integrity of Mr. Maponya. The fact of the matter is that was preceded by Mr. Maponya initiating litigation against the PIC for an amount of 45 million. Now, that matter is currently in its pleading stages before the Pretoria High Court. So I wouldn't want to go into that. But what I want to stress is Mr. Sithole read selective parts of submissions, but not the findings themselves. And where the PIC Commission dealt with Mr. Maponya and his entities relates to what Honorable Shivambo stated. It dealt with issues of overexposure to a single counterparty. And we will deal with that when we are afforded an opportunity, because in that instance, the PIC Commission sought to guide the PIC to say, in future, you need to have a policy. You cannot continue in this way of having multi transactions with one counterparty. But we will deal with that. Honorable Shivambo, in as far as the email that you say was submitted to you where Mr. Maponya was addressing letters to the president of the SCA and whatever, that related to his frustrations when in December 2020, specifically on the 23rd of December 2020, the SCA upheld his appeal against PIC in a matter involving Magai Makaya, which we deal with in our petition. Instead of honoring that SCA judgment, the PIC have approached the Constitutional Court seeking to appeal the SCA decision. We have opposed that matter. The matter is currently awaiting a decision of the Constitutional Court to decide whether they will entertain the PIC's appeal of the SCA decision. I will leave it at that stage. So further issues I will deal with once the PIC has dealt with. And going back to the issue of... sorry? Yes, Chair.
We are going to afford you enough time in the second round when we meet where PIC will respond to the issues that we have raised and those raised by members. So because now we have...
I appreciate that, Chair. I will rest my submissions at this stage then. Thank you.
You are welcome. No, we'll still afford you opportunity in the next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
You are welcome. Honorable Shibambo.
No, thanks, Chair. I think that part of the programming considerations that you must make is that the scheduling of the next meeting can happen within the recess period. I know that from Friday we're going on a recess that is going to resume Parliament on the 5th of May. And we're allowed as committees to request the chairperson of chairs to schedule engagements even during this recess period. So I think that has to be dealt with, because if we leave it for the entirety of March and then April and then later on in May, it would have delayed otherwise reachable solutions and guidance that can be provided through this process. So I would think that as part of the programming considerations, look into the premise of convening the meeting within the recess period. I think that is one consideration. But also we then need to deal with the PIC amendment bill. It's an act, not a PIC act, because on the 15th of February 2021, the president signed the amendment bill into an act. I think that it must be brought into fruition. It must be implemented now, because this era of interim boards doesn't seem to be aiding the stability of the Public Investment Corporation. So there's been interim boards of Royal Causa and different people, some have resigned. There's no clarity of how many people are in the board now, and a lot of them exposed to PIC dealings and all of those things there. The current act of the PIC has got clarity in terms of how the board must be comprised and how it must be constituted. I think as a committee, we should take a post-chain decision that what is law must be implemented. There is no sound reason why the PIC Act cannot be implemented in its entirety in the manner that it is. I think that in the immediate, we should communicate to National Treasury that let's implement the law. There is no sound national basis not to implement the law as is in terms of the composition of the board. And there are some also, I think in the amendment, broad policy recommendations that can be dealt with. But the major contribution I'm making now is that in the programming of the next meeting, take into consideration that we're going on recess, so we can still have to ask for a meeting to happen within the recess period. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Shmambo. And lastly, Honorable Lewis.
Chair, I just wanted to ask a question to the PIC that they can report back to us on when they come back here, and it relates to the exchange with Independent and Sekunjalo. There was a time when the PIC was considering a preservation of assets order from the court. And the PIC's excellent legal team was briefed our committee that they were busy preparing that application for that order, because they were of the view that Mr. Survey was stripping assets out of independent media and funneling those assets offshore to fund his personal lifestyle. And they then said that they had legal opinion to the effect that the order would take so long to obtain from the courts that by the time the order was obtained, the assets would be stripped. And I would really like an update from the PIC on exactly whether they are still considering going ahead with that preservation order request, and if they are, where is it? Because I'm very concerned that asset stripping is still taking place, and that it should be arrested and interdicted as soon as possible, so that more pensioners' money is not stolen effectively through this company. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. As we have agreed, I'll recap that will afford the PIC enough opportunity to prepare for responses, and we'll look at the parliamentary program in relation to the program of the committee and see if it is possible to meet during recess. So remember, our program is approved by the chairpersons chair of chairpersons So we'll look at all the possibilities that are there, and then make sure that we meet again as soon as possible. And as I've said, the two stakeholders will also be allowed again to respond to the issues or to the responses from the PIC. And as we have said, we are not a court of law. We are parliament. We play oversight over the organs of state. And in this regard, it is the PIC. So thanks very much, honorable members. Thanks very much to our stakeholders. We'll continue to meet more stakeholders. And actually, we are even supposed to do oversight where we go to meet either organs of state or community structures outside parliament. So oversight does not necessarily mean only conducting meetings virtually or in Cape Town. It also means going out there and see for ourselves some of the projects that we are talking about. So thanks very much, honorable members. We'll meet again. This was a very important engagement. I don't want anyone to suggest that this was a useless engagement. No, we agreed when we got the Mpati report that we might even go to an extent of inviting Justice Mpati himself to clarify certain issues. And remember, we are awaiting Treasury to come with a plan as to how are they going to implement the recommendations of Mpati. So there are quite a number of issues that are still outstanding in regard to the Mpati Commission. So Ayo, Sekunjalo, Times Independent, and Mr. Maponya will not be the last to meet from those who are affected by the Mpati Commission, because at the end, we want to see that the money that belongs to the workers is paid back, and also to see those who have borrowed that money to progress. We are not here to condemn any business. It will be wrong for members of parliament to take a stance that we like that business and we don't like other business. I don't think we should go to that extent. So thanks very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Long live the chair.
Amanda Noxie, oh, you're still there.
Yes, I'm sharp chair.
Sure.